Shabbat Shalom, brothers and sisters. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We are going to go ahead and again revise another Parashat, another cycle of these years. And today's Parashat is Hayei, the life of Sarah, our mother Sarah. In this Torah portion, we will see why the world, the Creator, always encode something very, very crucial for us to look for. In this Torah portion, we will see why the deeds of our fathers are still alive, even in this very moment that we are speaking of. And at the same time, we will see also the Tzadikim, which is the righteous, the just of Israel. That includes all of us as well. We will see why the word tzaddik or just or righteous is applied to us too. And why is it that whether or not we have conveyed this word as saint, as perfect, but in reality in the Torah it speaks about a little bit more complex than that. Also, we will see the connection between Adam, Dawid, and ultimately Mashiach. So let's start off right off the bag. And right before we start off, I will encourage all of you to, if you could, subscribe so you can get the latest production. We are always working in every production of the Torah effects. So please subscribe if you have not. Let's jump into it. Parashat Hayei, life of Sarah. We'll see why the Creator speaks in certain ways, but let's revise before we get there. Yitzhak's birth was an incredible miracle. It was a feat so incredible that even Sarah didn't believe it when she heard about it. And we can say it, Bereshit or Genesis 11:30, Sarah was sterile and didn't have any children. And it was so true to the point where, if you guys remember, she actually laughed. She actually giggled within herself. But of course, Yahweh, in that case, Mashiach, he heard that she was actually giggling inside within herself, and because she didn't believe that she was very old and she was going to have a baby. Although Yahweh already promised that seed that Abraham, our father Abraham, was going to go ahead and indeed promised and fulfilled. So let's continue something that it has happened as a sort of pattern. With this miracle birth, the pattern emerges like a web of the hidden thread that rises and weaves along in a beautiful tapestry. And it's so true. Sarai, the mother of Yitzhak, happens to be one of them. Ribka or Rebecca, mother of Yaakov. Again, Rachel, the mother of Yosef. The wife of Manoach, which is a Pholnif, the mother of Shimshon or Samson. And Hannah, the mother of Shamuel. All these women have implications, yet Yahweh was able to fulfill something that was impossible for men. Yahweh was actually able to fulfill every little thing that he was going to say he was. And also Shunami woman, which is the mother of Yonah. All these people, once again, were able to fulfill what Yahweh said was going to fulfill. Let's go back into Genesis 22, verse 2. He said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Yitzhak, and go to the land of Moriah, or Moriah. Then you shall offer it as a burnt offering on the mountains that I will point out to you. So the reason why I bring this, and we are revising, is because this happens to be the first time that you see the word love, achabah. This happens to be an exact moment where Yahweh said to Abraham, take your only begotten son. This yields to and reflects our shadow of our Mashiach, where it says Yahweh gave his only begotten Son. The word love, it is the first time the word love appears in the Torah. The gematria of love is 13, linking with the 13 midot, or attributes of Yahweh, which you will find it on Shemor or Exodus 34, which is Echad, number 1. The word Echad, number 1, is also 13. No wonder why Yahweh, our Mashiach, says, me and my Father are Echad, are one. This word Echad is the same as 13. It's amazing how the 13 attributes, Mashiach actually said it in a very codified way. If you remember last week's Torah portion, Yahweh said, Wayikra, call him the Malach of Yahweh from the Shammai, the heavens. Abraham, Abraham, and he said, he replied, here I am. If you guys remember where the Malach, the angel of Yahweh, says, do not touch that boy. For I have seen that you have put Yahweh first before your, in other words, your emotions, your human emotions. We are see something very important, because we are see that how Yahweh is, but at the same time, we are looking up something very important, and is a shadow of Mashiach once again. Abraham 22 verse 13 of Genesis, lifted up his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram cut off in the bushes by his horns. Abraham looked to the ram and offered as a burnt offering to the place of his son. We see that a shadow once again of Mashiach, because these horns were cut on the thorns of that bush, happens to be at the same place where Mashiach was given the crown of thorns. That ram in Hebrew, as we stated before, it's in Hebrew is Ayil, the same word for Ayil Almighty. The word behind, we know that is the word for future. Yahweh was indeed showing Abraham the future, and that future was going to be the ram of Yahweh that was going to be slaughtered by Israel from the very beginning of creation. In other words, the Ma'aset Abot Siman Libanim, which is the actions of our fathers or their parents serve as a portent for their children. In other words, the past repeats itself. What it was, it will be again. And you can find it on Ecclesiastes 1:9. All this is not something that we are making it up. When our father Abraham, our Bino Abraham, saw that Yahweh has something prepared, and he saw the future, and that future, right, in his back, it's Achor. Achor is basically the future. Let's continue. We see that this ram was cut off in these bushes. He happens to be the word Shemir. Shemir means thorns. The same as Mashiach was given the crown of thorns. Our Mashiach himself says something that in that particular event that took place with where our Bino, where that event is called the Akedah. Every Jewish person, every Hebrew person knows about this. The Akedah means the binding of Yitzhak. Abraham, your father, rejoiced that he would see my day, and he saw it, and what else? And he rejoiced in it. Why? Because Father Abraham happens to be a prophet, the same as our Yitzhak, the same as Joseph, the same as Moshe. Look what it says here in the first of Peter, or Kefa 1:10. The prophets who prophesied this gift of salvation, destined for you to examine and diligently inquire about it. In other words, they saw that the Mashiach was coming, they just didn't know when. 11, and they were trying to find out the time and the circumstances of what the Ruach of Mashiach referred to while in them, as the predictions of the suffering of Mashiach and the worthy things that follow. In other words, they were trying to see when Mashiach was coming, and because they had the ability of seeing the future. And it was revealed to them when they spoke about these things that their service was not for their own benefit, but for yours, for ours, in other words. And these same things have been proclaimed to you and by those who communicated the good news to you through the Ruach Kodesh sent from the heavens, the inspiration of Yahweh. And even the Malachim, the angels, longed to see these things. Why? Because they needed to be in the flesh to see what Mashiach was coming to show in the very first century. Even Mashiach himself said, "Blessed are you who are witnessing this, because the prophets, because your fathers longed to see this, but they couldn't." All this, we see that we fast forward to this Torah portion, the Parashat Hayei, and we see how our father Abraham was in grief. And the reason why he was in grief, because of what we just spoke of, the binding of Yitzhak. Mother Sarah, she was in pain that he was only begotten son, and yet one way or other she found out that he was going to be slaughtered. But of course it didn't. But the same pain, same agony, she actually left where Abraham was, and he left to Hebron. That's where she died, and I think that's one of the things that he really grieved our father Abraham, that she died alone. In this Torah portion, 23 verse 1, Sarah's life, the Torah splits these three portions of 127 in three sections: 10, 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years of the lives of Sarah. But I think the question shall be for all of us, why is it that the Torah always encoded some things that are difficult, and it is for us to decode it in a certain way according to a Torah? Why is it that the Creator always hides things? And I think the reason why is because He wants us to search for the Scriptures. He wants not to see the surface, but rather to search for exactly what Mashiach said: search the Scriptures, because you will see the everlasting life. Do you know that those words of Mashiach, even our Jewish brothers, they stated these things today? They said that when you study the Torah, they said that is at least one moment of time, 1 hour, is like you're almost in the Olam Haba, in the everlasting life. And exactly what Mashiach said. When we study the Torah, it is for us, it is our responsibility to search out the matter, what is hidden there. So let's find out why is 100, why is it the 20, and why is it the 7th? The 7 years of our mother Sarah is the innocence. The 20 years of the strength and idolism. And the 100 years is what she possessed of knowledge. In Hebrew is Sachar, the elder. All is what our mother Sarah possessed. But also want to bring something very, very intriguing. Our mother Sarah, she was a very beautiful, fond, beautiful woman. And the word for panin, which is face, it tells us that she was indeed very beautiful, to the point where 2 kings wanted to marry her, but they couldn't, because she was already a wife of our father Abraham. The first one was Pharaoh, and the second was Abimelech. Those 2 were forbidden to marry that beautiful woman. But as Even though she was very beautiful from the outside, the word penin means inner, which means that our mother Sarah was not just beautiful from the from the outside, but also from the inner beauty. And that's exactly what Yahweh wants from all of us, to have that inner beauty, to have those qualities, those essence that our Father Yahweh is looking for all of us, which is founded in the Torah. The problem nowadays with the secular world is that we concentrate way too much into the outer appearance. But the inner appearance, we don't put much attention to it. It should be the other way around. But in the Torah, you will see this pattern, this format, this tapestry that our Father Yahweh always wanted to work from us, from the inside out. Even our Mashiach said, clean the inside so the outside can be clean as well. He never said the other way around. But once again, our secular world wants to encourage all of us to work in the outer appearance rather than the inner. But in the Torah is the other way around. We are backwards, in other words. Let's continue. The Targum Ankelos of Genesis 23:2, Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is a Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham came to praise Sarah and weep for her. She came to do an eulogy. That eulogy happens to be, we always wonder, the Father Abraham gave a eulogy to our mother Sarah. And the answer is yes. The reason why it's not there is because later on, Shalomo wrote about it, and we need to find out where. And it happens to be the eulogy in Proverbs 31. You can read the whole chapter, but we're just going to read a portion. Who can find a virtuous woman? Because such is more value than the precious stones. Her husband trusts her from the depths of his heart. She will prove to be a great gain to him. And it's exactly what Father Abraham gave that praising eulogy of our mother Sarah. She was a foundation to him. She was somebody who was always with him. But the sad thing is that when she died alone. And those people who were weeping, who have grieving for her, was not only our father Abraham, but also was Ishmael, was also, of course, Yitzhak, her son, and also Eleazar and the 318 converts. Remember that Abraham was not the only one who converted them. It was also Sarah. We need to understand that the deeds of our forefathers are still alive. You might ask this question, how do you know that they're still alive? Because we're still talking about every single year of our fathers' deeds, which means that our fathers are alive in the eyes of Yahweh and should be in our eyes as well. Remember that Yahweh is not the Almighty of the dead, but the Almighty of the living. We should take this in consideration that when you die, if you are a tzaddik, if you are a righteous person, in the eyes of Yahweh, you're still alive. We're just in a sleeping mode. And let me talk about a little bit about the word tzaddik. Every time you hear the word tzaddikim, righteous, or the righteous person, right? Or they're just the person who's tzaddik, we tend to think is that just a perfect person that doesn't make any mistakes. But the reality of the situation is that a tzaddik is somebody who will tend to make mistakes no matter what. The only thing is that he will get up and mend his errors. There is a verse where it says that the righteous, the tzaddik, falls 7 times, and those 7 times he gets up, which means that we will tend to make mistakes. Great example, all the people that we're talking about. Our father Abraham made mistakes, Jacob made mistakes, Moshe made mistakes, Dawid made mistakes, all of them made mistakes, and yet they were considered a tzaddik. So we have to understand what the meaning of the word tzaddik means. Let's continue. I do want to talk about something very important before we close, and that's the Machpelah cave. Machpelah, as I stated last week, means double cave. And this happens to be the way to Eden, to Gan Eden, with the Garden of Eden. Our father Abraham wanted to buy that place of burial because he knew that place of burial was very, very important. That he knew that place was not just any place. He knew that place happens to be a place that perhaps was going to be the entrance of Gan Eden, which is the Garden of Eden. And who was buried there? Well, Adam was buried there. Chava or Eve was buried there. So he knew the secrets. And the question is, where did he learn all these secrets? He learned it from Noah. He learned it from Shem. He learned it from Heber. He learned it from all of them because he was taught by them. Remember that Shem was Melchizedek. Okay, Melchizedek happens to be a title, not a person. A title that was given to a person. In this case, in this timeline, Melchizedek was Shem. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about in a minute about that. But once again, Machpelah happens to be that. Now, if you notice, in this Torah portion, I just want to brace it up a little bit, but I do want to mention why they wanted to give it to him, these people that they were the owners of that property, in quote unquote. The Hittites wanted to give it to him for free. But as we stated long before, nothing is for free. They wanted to give it to him for free, but in reality, they were going to be owners at the end of the day. For instance, if I say to you, you can have that land, don't worry about it, you can live there, it's all yours. Yeah, but there's nothing written. There is no contract. There's nothing written. I'm just saying it verbally. That don't mean anything. Either in that time, in the time of our forefathers, or even in this day and age. Nothing is for free unless you put it in paper, on paper. If you have receipts, then you can even contest it in a court of law. And in this case, they just wanted to give it to him verbally, but in reality, they didn't want to give it to him at all because many years can come by and they can reclaim that land that is theirs, and you can do anything about it because it's basically theirs. They have the deeds of it. So that's why he needed to buy it. And still, they wanted to raise up the price. Do you know that back in those days, a land, any kind of land, could potentially be bought by maybe 30 shekels, 40 shekels. A donkey could easily be bought by 14 shekels. And a slave was cheaper than a donkey, 10 shekels. So, in other words, a land was rather kind of cheap, 40, 50 shekels. So they gave it to him for 400 shekels, which is like fourth or triple or more than triple the amount of what it was actually worth. They did not want to give it to him. They did not want to sell it to him. And yet he said, don't worry, I will pay the 400 shekels. And it was sold. They didn't want to give it to him at all. So once again, That's the reason why he bought that land. And we know that he had the receipts afterwards because later they tried to reclaim it. Now, these 400 shekels are something that it has a lot to do with the 400 years of our forefathers dwelling in Canaan, in the land of Canaan, and also in Egypt. Now, as I stated before, it needed to be written, write it down, so they can have the receipt of it. Now, let's continue a little bit more. And I do want to, once again, talk about a little bit of about their forefathers and how they managed to do certain things, even though after the death of our mother Sarah, the Torah says in 25 verse 1, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. Keturah happens to be someone that you and I know about it. Targum Yonatan in 25 verse 1 of this verse, on the Aramaic version, says Abraham added and took a wife, and her name was Keturah. She is Hagar, who had been bound to him from the very beginning. Remember that if you didn't know about who was Keturah, Keturah happens to be the daughter of Pharaoh. When Abraham went down to Egypt with his wife Sarah, remember that Pharaoh wanted to marry her, right? And Yahweh said, you can't take her because she already has a husband. If you take her, you will die. From that moment on, Pharaoh was afraid. He said, you know what? You need to get out of here. I will give you gifts. I will give you gold. I will give you sheep and all the herd. No worries. I even going to throw as a bonus prize, I will give you my daughter. And she happens to be Keturah, Hagar. And she became the servant of Sarah. And that's the backstory of Keturah. Now, let's go a little bit forward. 25 verse 7, and this was how long Abraham lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last, dying at the ripe old age, an old man full of years. He was gathered to his people. And where he was buried in that same cave of Machpelah, the same cave that he paid for it, that he had receipts, and you can even contest it on the court of law. Now, all this, once again, later on, we will talk about more about the cave of Machpelah a little later with Yosef. I do want to show this to make a point. If you notice here in the strip of line that goes from up down, this line happens to be the flood. Here you can see that Noah lived 950 years. Shem lived 600 years, but I do want to concentrate on Shem, which happens to be Melchizedek. He was 100 when the flood Mabul came. After that, he lived another 500 years, but I do want to make a point that people they were born and died, and Melchizedek was still alive. Let me make a point of that. Arphaxad, he lived 430 years. He would die, and Shem is still alive. Salah was born and died, and Shem is still alive. Peleg he lived and died, and Shem is still alive. Saruch, he lived and died, and Shem is still alive. Nahor, the grandfather of Abraham, he lived and died, and Shem is still alive. Terach, the father of Abraham, lived and died, and Shem is still alive. Abraham, okay, he lived and died in what? Guess what? Shem is still alive, Melchizedek. And the reason why I bring this and want to make a point is because Shem happens to be Melchizedek. He is, and let me pause here for a moment, they're supposed to carry on the avodah, the service of Yahweh Sebaot. He's the one who's supposed to pass it on to the next generation, but he couldn't pass it to the next generation because he was still alive. He couldn't pass it to Abraham because Abraham died before he did. So guess what? Who did he give it to? He was passed on, and that's one of the reasons why Yaakov needed to take the blessings from Esau, because Esau was going to trample and end it in death. And that's one of the reasons why he was advised from his mother, and later from Abraham, to make sure that that blessing was not going to be wasted, and the firstborn as well. So that's one of the reasons why Yaakov took that Melchizedek blessing. And later on, we will talk about a little bit farther than that. Let's go forward. Let's end with this, with the Haftarah, which is the Torah portion of the ending of this Torah portion, which happens to be on the First of Kings 1:35. In the very beginning, it says, the Melech, the King Dawid, was old and advanced in years. You can read the whole chapter if you want, but I just want to summarize and want to make a point that Dawid died of 70 years. He was very young when he died, because 70 years nowadays is not really much. Well, with medication, is not really much. You can last 70 years, okay? But King Dawid, because he was a warrior, okay? And all the things that he went through, he died of 70 years. But I do want to make a point. Why 70 years? There's something encoded in the life of Dawid linked to Adam. First, I want to show this is in Paleo Hebrew, the house of Dawid. The house of Dawid in this inscription, in this stone, date from the time of Dawid. And I want to make a point that this was written in Paleo Hebrew. It's not traditional Hebrew. Adam was shown all the generations of mankind and saw that Dawid was destined to die shortly right after he was born. After his sin, Adam was to live 1,000 years. Remember that Yahweh said, in that day that you should eat of that fruit, that day you should die. That day happens to be 1,000 years. One year equals 1,000, right? So he was not going to pass 1,000 years. Yet, however, he was asked Yahweh if he could give part of his life to Dawid, because he was showing all the generations of mankind, and he saw Dawid, eventually granting him 70 years. Thus, Adam, the world's first king, died of the age of 930. Therefore, it is connected to Dawid. The book of Shamuel, 2nd of Shamuel, says Dawid was 30 when he began his reign, and another 40 when he reigned right after. This gives us the momentum to understand why is he linked to Adam and Dawid, and ultimately to Mashiach. The Haftarah passage reveals that Dawid died of the age of 70. The number 70 itself is significant, as it is equivalent in gematria to the word sod. Sod is, in other words, secret. So this word sod gives us the momentum to understand that there is something encoded in the life of and on the years in the life of Dawid. The word Dawid is an acronym. Aleph is for Adam. The Dalet is Dawid. and the Mem is Mashiach. All these three individuals are linked one to another. Adam was given to the task to bring heavens here to earth, but he wasn't able to. Dawid was given the task from that linked to Adam to fulfill the same thing, but because remember that he was born bloody, reddish, right? And that we'll see it next Parashat about that. But he was a man of blood. He was a warrior. But he couldn't finish up his task, which is to build the temple, the Mikdash. Mashiach is the ultimate person who happens to be all to Adam and Dawid. He is the son of Dawid. He is the previous Adam. He is the Mashiach. Look at what he says, Dawid, about himself, and ultimately shouting our Mashiach. 51 verse 5 of Psalms, it is true that I was conceived in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. Why is it that these words of Dawid shadows what Mashiach was going to do in the future? And the reason for it is because Dawid's mother happens to be a Moabite. And in the eyes of the Yahudim in those times, it wasn't very seen in a very good way. Okay? Because marrying a Moabite happens to be a disgusting thing because it was a pagan. But remember, that seed happens to be Ruth's seed. Remember that Ruth, she married Boaz. He redeemed her. But later on, we'll see why the Torah speaks that no Moabites will dwell in the house of Yahweh. It's not referring to the females, but rather to the males. And there's a reason why later we will speak of. But let's continue about what Dawid is speaking of. 69 verse 8 and 9, I am a stranger to my brethren or my brothers, and a stranger to my mother's children. For the zeal of thy house is devouring me, and reproaches are falling on me and those who reproach you. Why are we bringing this to you? Is to understand that the same thing was happening to Dawid, was happening to Mashiach, was happening to Yosef. Okay? All this is a shadow as we see other things to come. Remember when Dawid was about to be anointed as a king? Okay? Anointed means Mashiach. And let me pause here for a second. When the mother of Dawid saw that all the 7 sons were not fit to be king, because Shemuel thought that among those 7 handsome, beautiful men, that they were the sons of Yishai, among them was going to become the next king, yet Yahweh showed him that it wasn't neither one of them. It was actually somebody wasn't even there. But even Yishai says, well, I have seven sons here, but there's another one. He never said that, I have another son. He said, there's another one over there, some shepherd over there that he's guarding the sheep. He was so not afraid, but ashamed to say that there was another one. And yet these 7 pillars of Yishai were rejected. And that's one of the reasons why the mother of Dawid said these very words. These are the words of mother of Dawid, and yet Dawid wrote about it. The stone that the builders rejected, it has become the cornerstone. And Dawid became the cornerstone of Jerusalem. He is the one who established Jerusalem. Remember that he's the one who bought that land, and he's the one who conquers that land because he knew the secrets of that land. And yet he conquered that. He bought that portion for a certain amount of money, and the Mikdash became the main cornerstone there. So what do we see here? We see the ultimate foreshadow of Mashiach. And what can we say about all this? Is that Yahweh always have prepared something very special. May Yahweh have chesed and favor to all of us, and we can learn more Torah more and more. I'm Moreh Rapha'Yah. We'll see you next time, and may Yahweh gives us the wisdom and understanding about all this. Shabbat Shalom.
Give us a like. Thank you. We'll begin.